Keanu Reeves stops cold when he hears McDonald's cashier can't afford gift for daughter and does this. The McDonald's on Sunset Boulevard was buzzing with its usual late afternoon rush. Inside, the holiday decorations hung cheerfully along the walls, tinsel, garlands, and twinkling lights filling the space with a festive warmth. A plastic Christmas tree with multicolored lights stood proudly near the soda machine, while speakers softly played All I Want for Christmas Is You. Customers laughed, chatted, and shuffled from one foot to the other as they waited for their orders. Behind the counter, employees bustled back and forth, wearing holiday-themed red and green aprons. Sophie Thompson, a 30-year-old cashier with a bright smile that belied her exhaustion, was doing her best to keep up at the pace. Her dark curls were pulled back into a messy bun, and her kind eyes lit up whenever she greeted a customer. No one would have guessed that Sophie was a single mother to a 6-year-old girl named Ava, or that she'd been struggling to make ends meet since her husband left 3 years ago. His departure had been sudden, a note on the kitchen table, his closet empty. Since then, Sophie had worked tirelessly, balancing 2 jobs, surviving on 4 hours of sleep, and doing everything she could to give Ava a sense of normalcy. It was Christmas Eve, and Ava was excited to spend the evening watching her favorite holiday movie. Sophie had promised they could watch Elf again, and despite her exhaustion, she intended to keep that promise. She tried her best to make their small apartment feel festive. She'd put up a tiny Christmas tree, strung up a few lights, and even hung stockings, though she had no gifts to fill them with. She knew Ava didn't understand why Santa might not be able to bring her the doll she'd been asking for, a doll that Sophie simply couldn't afford. The bell above the door chimed, pulling Sophie from her thoughts. A man in a worn leather jacket and a baseball cap stepped inside. Sophie didn't pay him much attention at first. She had a line of customers waiting. But as he approached the counter, she looked up and her heart skipped a beat. It was Keanu Reeves. Sophie blinked, her mouth going dry for a moment before she forced herself to smile. "Welcome to McDonald's. What can I get you today?" she asked, her voice steady despite the flutter of nerves. Keanu gave her a polite smile, his eyes kind. "I'll take a Big Mac, fries, and a chocolate shake, please." She nodded, quickly entering the order into the register. "That'll be $8.75. Keanu pulled out his wallet, handed her a $10 bill, and said, "Keep the change." "Thank you," Sophie replied, handing him his receipt. She turned to call out the order of the kitchen, but she couldn't help noticing that Keanu lingered near the counter, his eyes drifting over the restaurant, taking in the decorations, the bustling staff, and the families enjoying their meals. He seemed lost in thought. Behind her, her co-worker Maria nudged her gently. "Hey Soph, you okay? You seem a little out of it," Maria said, her voice soft with concern. Sophie forced a smile and nodded. "Yeah, just tired." Maria raised an eyebrow, clearly not buying it. "You sure? I mean, I know it's Christmas and all, but you seem more tired than usual." Sophie sighed, her smile faltering. She glanced around to make sure no one was listening, then leaned closer to Maria. "It's Ava. I couldn't get her anything for Christmas this year. I tried, but between rent, bills, and groceries, there just wasn't enough left." Her voice broke, and she quickly wiped her eyes. "I just feel like I'm failing her." Maria's eyes softened and she reached out to squeeze Sophie's hand. "Soph, you're doing everything you can. Ava knows you love her. That's what matters most." Sophie nodded, her heart heavy. "I know. I just wish I could give her something special." Unbeknownst to Sophie, Keanu had overheard the conversation. He hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but the raw emotion in Sophie's voice had caught his attention. He watched as she tried to pull herself together, putting on a brave face for the customers. He could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the weight she carried on her shoulders. Keanu's order was ready, and he took the tray, but instead of sitting down, he approached the counter again. "Excuse me, Sophie, right?" he said, catching her attention. Sophie looked up, surprised. "Yes, sir? Is there something wrong with your order?" Keanu shook his head. "No, everything's fine. I just couldn't help but overhear what you were saying to your friend." He paused and then added gently, "I hope you don't mind." Sophie's cheeks blushed with embarrassment and she looked down. "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for anyone to hear that." Keanu smiled, his voice kind. "Don't apologize. I just wanted to say that you're doing an amazing job. Being a single mom isn't easy, and you're doing everything you can for your daughter. That's more than enough." Sophie's eyes filled with tears and she quickly wiped them away. "Thank you," she whispered. "That means a lot." Keanu reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet again. He took out several $100 bills and placed them on the counter. "Here," he said, his voice gentle. "I want you to have this. Buy your daughter the gift she wants. Make this Christmas special for her. Sophie's eyes widened and shook her head. I can't take this, it's too much. Keanu held up a hand, stopping her protest. Please, I want to help you. You deserve to have a good Christmas, and so does your daughter. Sophie's hands trembled as she reached for the money, her eyes filling with tears once more. Thank you, she whispered, her voice breaking. I don't know how to thank you. Keanu smiled, his eyes warm. You don't need to thank me, just make it a good Christmas for Ava. Sophie nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude. I will, I promise. Keanu gave her a nod, then turned and walked towards the door. Before he left, he looked back at her and said, Merry Christmas, Sophie. Sophie watched as he left, her heart full. She clutched the money to her chest, feeling a sense of hope she hadn't felt in a long time. For the first time in years, she felt like maybe, just maybe, things were going to be okay. That night after her shift ended, Sophie hurried to the nearest toy store. She found the doll Ava had been asking for, a beautiful doll with long brown hair and a sparkly pink dress. She also picked out a new winter coat for Ava, along with a few other small gifts. She couldn't wait to see the look on Ava's face when she woke up on Christmas morning. When Sophie got home, she quietly placed the gifts under their small tree. She stood there for a moment, looking at the twinkling lights and the presents beneath the tree. And she felt a sense of peace wash over her. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she was giving Ava the Christmas she deserved. The next morning, Ava woke up early, her eyes lighting up when she saw the gifts under the tree. Mommy, look, Santa came, she exclaimed, her voice filled with excitement. Sophie smiled, her heart swelling with love. He sure did, sweetheart. Ava tore into the wrapping paper, her laughter filling the room as she pulled out the doll she'd been dreaming of. She hugged it tightly, her eyes shining with joy. Thank you, Mommy, this is the best Christmas ever. Sophie's eyes filled with tears and she knelt down to hug her daughter. You're welcome, sweetheart, I love you so much. I love you too, Mommy, Ava said, her voice muffled against Sophie's shoulder. As they sat together, surrounded by torn wrapping paper and the warmth of the Christmas tree lights, Sophie couldn't help but think of Keanu and the kindness he'd shown her. She knew she would never be able to thank him enough for what he had done, but she also knew that his generosity had given her something priceless, hope. A few days later, Sophie received a package in the mail. She opened it to find a card and 2 tickets to a movie premiere. The card read, Dear Sophie, I hope you and Ava had a wonderful Christmas. I wanted to invite you both to the premiere of my new movie. I thought Ava might enjoy it. Merry Christmas, Keanu. Sophie smiled, tears filling her eyes once more. She knew that this Christmas was just the beginning of something new, a reminder that there was still kindness in the world, and that even in the darkest of times there was always hope.